Epstein scandal is not just about one billionaire predator. It is part of a decades-long network involving intelligence agencies, organized crime, and some of the world's most powerful people. This dates back all the way back to the Reagan years. I could not believe it when I was doing the research for this video, how far back this actually goes, all the way back to Ronald Reagan years. It was absolutely incredible how deep this goes. So, hey guys, it's Delana. Today we're diving into one of the most explosive investigations ever published about the Epstein case, a story that connects Israel intelligence, American billionaires, and a secretive group called the Mega Group. This isn't just another conspiracy theory. This is documented history that mainstream media has largely ignored. By the end of this video, you'll understand how sexual blackmail operations have been used for decades as tools of intelligence gathering and political control. I think political pushback comes from the bipartisan agreement that it needs to stop now. President Trump wants us to push it all underneath the rug, but we need to shine a light on this corruption. It involves young children being abused. I think, again, across both sides of the aisle, is definitely, I think everybody's had enough of it and not willing to just throw it underneath the rug. I also think that if no one wants to talk about it, it's almost like we're just allowing it to go on because it will never ever stop. This will just keep going on. And like I said, I'm with Candace Owens on this one. We need to dig up as much dirt as possible and talk about it. It's the only way things are going to start to change. So I found this incredible story about kind of the back part, business end of all this, going way back to the Reagan years. And I think sometimes that they want to look at this superficially. It's like this has been going on for the last 4, 5, 6, 10 years. Now this goes way back into the 80s. It's absolutely incredible. So stick with me. I'm going to dive through this whole entire story. It's actually pretty incredible. So the first person to start with is this guy here, Ronald Lauder. So Estee Lauder, he is actually the heir to the Estee Lauder throne. And that is a huge cosmetics company. And so his connections go much, much deeper than just cosmetics. Lauder has known Donald Trump for over 50 years, going back to their time at the Wharton School. But here's where it gets interesting. They both shared a connection to one of the most powerful and controversial lawyers in American history. And that brings us to this guy. This is Roy Cohn. And he's been working with Trump for a very long time. I think it was his first fixer. Here's a picture of them together, and then here again. So Roy Cohn was Senator Joseph McCarthy's chief counsel during the Red Scare. And the Red Scare was during all back, like I said, in the 80s, where the Soviet Union and all that was going on. And the Red Scare was part of McCarthyism. And that was when, during the McCarthy administration, they thought that there was people that were part of, that believed in communism, things like that. And they tried to get them out of the administration. So kind of like what's going on with the liberals, the hardcore liberals now. But they're just they tried to get rid of anybody that they thought believed in communism and things. They tried to get them out of the administration. So yeah, that was considered the Red Scare, and which is also another fun fact on this guy, Roy Cohn. He was a closet homosexual, but they also had not only the Red Scare, they had the lavender scare, which also meant they were trying to get rid of all the homosexuals and stuff out of the administration as well. And he actually died of AIDS in 1986, and I'm not sure if they knew he was gay or not. Very interesting, but that was just a fun fact on him. But anyways, he was Trump's mentor and fixer and had a central figure in decades of sexual blackmail operations. When Trump first went to see or dealt with Roy Cohn is because they were having troubles in their New York, some of their New York condos or apartments, and something about racism. And so they went to him because they were getting some bad press about being racist and stuff like that. So that was one of the reasons that Trump started to deal with Roy Cohn in the first place. So yeah, he was definitely he was the central figure in all of the sexual blackmail operations. So then we go to this There's this party, this is an infamous party in 1981. Cohn hosted a dinner party at his Greenwich estate. Present were Ronald Lauder's parents, Estee Lauder, his mom and his stepdad, Donald and Ivana Trump, and other powerful players. That wasn't just a social gathering, it was a meeting of minds that would shape American politics for decades. But here's where it gets important. Just 2 years later, despite having zero government experience, Lauder was appointed as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for European and NATO affairs under the Reagan administration. So I'll go back to that. But anyways, so Ronald Lauder was also friends with Bibi Netanyahu. So during his Pentagon tenure, Lauder became deeply involved in Israeli politics and formed close ties with young Benjamin Netanyahu. The relationship would prove crucial to Netanyahu's rise to power, particularly in his upset in 1996. Now, here's where the Epstein connection gets really intriguing. When FBI agents raided Epstein's mansion in like 2000, it was 2019, they found something unusual. They found an Austrian passport with Epstein's photo, but a fake name. Apparently, he had a lot of fake passports at his mansion with all different kinds of names on it. But the Australian one was particularly troublesome because his lawyers claimed a friend had given the passport in 1980s for protection during international travel when Jewish Americans were targets of hijacking. But here's the problem: getting an Australian passport requires residency and language fluency. That Epstein didn't have either of those things. So who could have helped him get it? Well, ironically, Ronald Lauder was U.S. ambassador to Austria from 1986 to 1987. That is exactly when that passport was issued. It was perfectly positioned to acquire such a document, especially given his public concerns about Jewish safety and his deep connections to Austrian officials. But the connections don't stop there. Lauder was well connected to Epstein's former partner and patron, well, from Alan Greenberg at Bear Stearns, where he had started working under Greenberg at Bear Stearns, and he had absolutely really no experience whatsoever. So he made it up the ranks at Bear Stearns very quickly. And then that's when he started his friendship with Trump, and that was back in 1987. That was the same year that fake passport was issued. So then we come to the mega group. So here is the mega group here. And in the early 1990s, Lauder joined a secretive organization that would become central to this whole entire story, the mega group. And here's a picture of the mega group right here. So it was founded in 1991 by Charles Bronfman and Leslie Wexner. The mega group was described as a loosely organized club of 20 of the nation's wealthiest and most affluential Jewish businessmen. The annual dues back there in the 90s were over $30,000. The official story was philanthropy and Jewish causes. The reality was far more complex. Leslie Wexner was Epstein's main client and the only known client of his hedge fund. Then you have Charles and Edgar Bronfman. They were media moguls with deep intelligent ties. And then you have Ronald Lauder, who's, again, the cosmetics heir that turned diplomat. And then you have Michael Steinhardt, and he was a total pioneer of the hedge funds. And then you have Max Fisher. He was a political kingmaker and presidential advisor. And then they were also connected to Maxwell. But here's what the mainstream media won't tell you. Several prominent mega group leaders had documented ties to organized crime, specifically the network that led to notorious mobster Meyer Lansky. And I have a photo. So this is Meyer Lansky's here. And there was an article with him in the New York Times that I found that talks about all his crimes where he was just starting to get caught at that time. So Michael Steinhardt openly wrote about his father being Lansky's jewel face of choice. The Bronfman family built their fortune during Prohibition, working closely with Lansky's smuggling operations. Max Fisher allegedly worked with Detroit's Purple Gang, which was part of Lansky's network. That this isn't ancient history. These connections would prove crucial to understanding how like very much in intellectual agencies in organized crime and political power intersected for more than decades. So then we have the Mossad connection. So here is kind of the breakdown from the Bronfmans. And so they have them, and then they all tie back to um, Maxwell. And this always goes back to the 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐜𝐫𝐤, that I don't know, that story with they had the young girls up in northern New York, and that it was all ties to them. So those networks lead back to Wexner, and they lead back to Maxwell. Very convenient. So now we need to talk about the Israel intelligence, because this is where the Epstein story gets truly explosive. In 1997, the Washington Post broke a story about an intercepted phone call between Mossad officials. In the call, one official mentioned going to 𝐬𝐫𝐽 to obtain a secret U.S. government document. The FBI launched an investigation to find this 𝐬𝐫𝐽, believing it was high-level American spy. But what if 𝐬𝐫𝐽 wasn't a person at all? Almost exactly 1 year after this spy scandal broke, the Wall Street Journal first reported on the existence of the billionaire group, informally called the 𝐬𝐫𝐽 Group. Coincidence? Well, let's examine the evidence. The 𝐬𝐫𝐽 Group had deep ties to Israel intelligence through multiple channels. And again, here are some of the channels here between the Bronfmans, Wexner, and Maxwell. So Ronald Lauder founded IDC 𝐟𝐨𝐫𝐿, an Israel university closely associated with Mossad recruitment. He also co-founded broadcasting networks with former U.S. diplomats connected to intelligent operations. Several 𝐬𝐫𝐽 Group members were business partners with the confirmed Mossad agents, including mega mogul Robert Maxwell. So here we go. There's and he obviously had a huge empire, media empire. So, and here's where it gets very personal for Epstein. Robert Maxwell was obviously, as we all know, the father of 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐜𝐫𝐽 Maxwell, his longtime associate and alleged accomplice. Robert Maxwell wasn't just a media mogul. He was one of the most important Mossad agents of the 20th century. Born Jan Ludwig Hodge, Maxwell had influenced arms shipments to Israeli parliamentaries in 1948 and later became deeply involved in the Mossad operations throughout Europe. But Maxwell's most significant contribution to Israeli intelligence was his role in one of the greatest intelligence coups in history, the PROMIS software scandal. And here I'm going to show you so here, this is the PROMIS software that was built in the United States. And this was like revolutionary software. And this is where I find no one's talking about all this stuff. So PROMIS was revolutionary software developed in the US government to track cases and manage data. But Israel intelligence, working with corrupt American officials, managed to install a backdoor in the software. So this software, essentially, the PROMIS software was taking all like the DOJ, the FBI, and local police stations and trying to track kind of criminals. They all had their own system, but they all didn't talk to each other. So this company, which is a whole, could be a whole other video, but there's a whole scandal there because the company, the Hamiltons that created this company that it was called, I forget what the name of the company was called, but anyways, they started this company that built this software. 𝐸𝐮𝐻 was their name. And their last name was Hamilton. It was a couple. So they created this software. They came up with this brilliant idea that to connect all these different softwares from all these different forms of the government dealing with criminals in law. And so you could be in the FBI, you could see the DOJ files, and so that it all connected them. So what Israel did is they got a backdoor into the software. And there was a whole scandal. Someone tried to break this story, and the journalist that was diving into this story ended up getting killed. Like I said, this is going to be a whole other video I might do on this one because it was very interesting. So someone actually was kind of catching on to what was going on, and then he ends up getting murdered in his hotel room. So I'm not sure how much research actually kind of came to light in the media at that time because the one guy that was kind of diving into it was killed. So Robert Waxwell then sold this compromised software to governments and companies worldwide, giving the Mossad unprecedented access to sensitive data from dozens of countries. This operation was so successful that essentially gave Israeli intelligence access to blackmail material that the CIA and FBI had been collecting for decades. So then all of a sudden, Maxwell dies. So Maxwell threatened to expose these operations unless the Mossad helped save his failing company. And so he was in his company. One of the problems that he was having with his company is that they were stealing all this money from the pension fund. So when he kind of went missing, died, murdered, whatever happened, he had just been caught for stealing all this pension fund money from his company, and he was asking for them to help him with this problem, but unfortunately, he ended up dead. So he was found dead on his yacht in 1991, the same yacht named after his daughter, 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿𝐵𝐿𝐵𝐿𝐵. So he had this yacht, and it was Lady 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿𝐵𝐿𝐵 or My 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿𝐵, and he had 9 kids, and he ended up naming the yacht after his daughter. Another fun fact with this too is that Rupert Murdoch ended up buying his yacht. So I just thought was interesting. Anyways, at Maxwell's funeral in Israel resembled a state funeral attended by 6 serving and former heads of Israeli intelligence. Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir eulogized him, saying Maxwell had done more for Israel than can be today, he said. So there was a lot, I think that was a loaded statement. So after her father's death, 𝐮𝐻𝐿𝐵𝐿𝐵 Maxwell, she ended up heading to New York, where she soon met Jeffrey Epstein. And I also heard this might not be true according to this story that I would kind of been diving into. I think that she actually met Jeffrey Epstein before, but not positive on that one. But Epstein wasn't just building like a sexual blackmail operation at that time. He was also investing in technology that bore striking similarities to his girlfriend's father's intelligent work. After Epstein's 2008 conviction, he partnered with former Israel Prime Minister 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿𝐵 Barak to invest in an Israeli startup called �Carbine. So this again gets back into the software, and so this is his company �Carbine. And here's how this is all linked. So he invested with the prime minister, and it all trickles down, and it's all part of the Israeli thing. So �Carbine is a company that sells software to 911 call centers that provides emergency services with access to callers' cameras, locations, and runs their identities through government database. So very conveniently, it has cameras and databases on people all over the place. It's marketed as a solution to mass shootings, but critics note its potential for mass surveillance. The company's executive team consists entirely of former Israeli intelligence or operatives, including veterans of Unit 8200, Israel's equivalent of the NSA. Sound familiar? Just like the promised the software decades earlier, we have Israeli intelligence operatives marketing software to government agencies that could potentially be used for surveillance and data collection. So what's the big picture here? So this is what we know so far. The mega group connected some of America's wealthiest individuals with ties to organized crime. Several members had documented connections to Israel intelligence. The group's co-founder, Leslie Wexner, was Epstein's main client and gave him a $56 million mansion. Ghislaine Maxwell's father was a confirmed Mossad agent who ran intelligence operations for more than decades. Epstein had business relationships with former Israeli prime ministers, and those connections with businesses that have surveillance and cameras on everybody. So this Epstein's operation wasn't just random criminal activity. It was part of a sophisticated intelligence network that had been developing for decades. The use of sexual blackmail as an intelligence tool isn't new. What's new is the scale, the technology, and the level of political access these operations achieved. When intelligence agencies, organized crime, and extreme wealth converge, the result is a shadow power structure that operates outside normal democratic oversight. So I think that's what we're all seeing here. So today, why does this story matter so much today? And I really feel like this part of the story is being completely ignored, because it's about understanding how power really works today. The integration of Israel intelligence connected companies into American infrastructure absolutely continues to this day. Unit 82,000 veterans are founding startups that are being acquired by Google, Microsoft, and other tech giants. Major American technology companies are moving operations to Israel, often with backing from the same Republican donors connected to these networks. Meanwhile, the same financial networks that supported these operations for decades, more than decades, continue to wield enormous political influence in both the United States and Israel. The question isn't whether these networks still exist, it's how they've adapted to the digital age and what that means for the democratic governance, which is very interesting. And again, that's why we're not supposed to talk about what files. So it'll be very interesting to see what Trump does going forward. He said that he wasn't going to release any more files, but now he says he wills, but we'll see. So I really truly believe this Epstein case isn't an isolated incident and that what they're trying to portray, I think this goes way, way, way much deeper. It was the exposure of a small part of a much, much larger system that has operated in the shadows for decades. Understanding these connections doesn't require believing in conspiracy theories. It requires looking at documented history and following the money, the relationships, and the power structures that connect them. The mega group story shows us extreme wealth, intelligence agencies, and organized crime, and how they converge to create power structure that operates outside normal democratic oversight. Whether we call it a deep state, shadow government, or simply corrupt networks doesn't matter as much as recognizing that these systems exist and understanding how they work. And I think, again, that's why they're trying to gaslight us all. They just want us to think it's this is just about not that it's not just about the children. It is, but I think that what they're trying to get us to focus on is not what's going on the deep state and with all these connections and with the computer software and things like that. I think it just gets so much deeper. And so, anyways, what do you guys think? Are these just coincidences or do they really reveal something more systematic and about how power operates behind the scenes? Let me know your comments and don't forget to subscribe. I really think that we need to share these stories because the more that we don't talk about it, the more it's just going to keep going on. And like I said, I did a deep dive into this story that I found because I was researching something else. And then I fell into this story about the software. And I just thought no one's talking about any of this because I think they're just they're trying to like, it's like squirrel, like let's just focus over here and we're kind of really missing about how deep this goes. And that's why I think it's important to share because I think it all needs to be brought out to the open. Anyways, guys, please like, subscribe, share, and let me know what you guys think. Is this just smoke and mirrors, or is there actually something going on here below the surface? And are these software in the intel, do they have a backdoor into the big software that is kind of the US is using in their legal system right now? It would be very interesting. So anyways, please like, subscribe, share, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.